let's go ahead and move on then to SCOTUS politics, because how this all came out is a crazy story in and of itself. As you said, basically scoop of the century there from Politico. And the overall analysis of how this is going to affect the court for decades to come really is not yet being grappled with. Put this up there on the screen from SCOTUS blog. The document leaked to Politico is almost certainly authentic draft opinion by Justice Alito that reflects what he believes at least 5 members of the court have voted to support, overruling Roe. But as Alito's draft, it does not reflect the comments or the reactions of other justices. So that is definitely something to keep in mind whenever you're looking at that. We don't yet know if you're going to have concurrences from Justice Thomas, concurrences from Justice Barrett, and others. That, people should remember, they're not entirely familiar with the way that these things go, but there can usually be, up to like 10 documents that are issued with different concurrences.
People can dissent
selective
from specific
concurrence.
pieces.
Right.
And
it can be hundreds of pages.
It is noteworthy. The draft is from February, so
it could have changed.
It could have already changed. That's an important thing to note in this.
Right. Okay. And so then, in terms of the leak itself, there's a lot of questions about this leak. Let's put this up there on the screen again from SCOTUS blog. It is impossible to overstate that the earthquake this will cause inside of the court. In terms of the destruction of trust amongst justices and staff, this leak is the gravest, most unforgivable sin. And what he means is that within the court itself, it is a long-standing precedent. You do not leak draft opinions because they get issued by the court itself whenever everything is ready. Because it is literally the law of the land. It can change markets. It can change the country. Obviously, this one is going to impact our politics dramatically. And so, as I understand it, having spoken now to some people who were on SCOTUS or familiar with the process for clerking, this is the cardinal sin. You are never allowed to leak, not only to reporters, but a draft opinion itself being circulated is that is a whole other realm. Now, we don't know the circumstances under which this was leaked, and I do think it is worth kind of understanding who the people who brought this to light are. So, the 2 reporters who published this at Politico, Josh Gernstein and Alex Ward. So what's interesting about the 2 of them, Chris, I actually knew Alex back in my Pentagon days. He's a national security reporter who used to work at Vox. Josh Gernstein is a legal expert. You and I are probably most familiar with him for his reporting on the FBI. So it's not that he's more familiar, again, with national security law. There are a lot of questions right now as to why exactly the person who broke the people who broke probably the biggest scoop of the last 20 years are not Adam Liptak, who is the New York Times correspondent, Nina Totenberg, the NPR Supreme correspondent. She may have been placed back off of leave for some ethical decisions. But anyway, Nina Totenberg, she's the previous person who ever actually reported inside the Supreme Court. Jane Mayer over at The New Yorker. There are many reporters in this town who have been covering the court, frankly, know the justices, have dined with them, been to their parties, weddings, all kinds of stuff. The fact that they did not report this and get this is pretty extraordinary. It leads to a question also on the leak strategy. And this is another thing I want to spend a little bit of time on, which is that there is an overwhelming assumption right now that this leak came from a liberal member of the court, either a justice herself, himself, or a member of their staff. But there also is a prevailing opinion on the right, in right legal world, that this was actually leaked because this is the majority opinion that should have been and has now been kind of hammered away by Roberts or by Justice Kavanaugh, because we don't know what the internal one is. So, I mean, I don't really know what to think. One theory floating out there is that the reason Gernstein and Ward got it is because it's possible that the email system for the Supreme Court was hacked, and by within the national security realm.
I haven't seen that theory.
Yeah, so there's one theory that this was actually a hack of their email servers, and then it was leaked, to people who would be familiar with those types of sources, possibly like the NSA. Once again, by the way, dude, this is not
pure speculation. That's interesting, though.
Number 2 is that this was a liberal justice. I would say the overwhelming kind of opinion is on that one. Number 3
Although
is that—
it seems like, to your point about who got the scoop, it does seem like if it was a liberal justice, it would go to
an Adam
Nina
Liptak
Totenberg.
Or Nina Totenberg.
Yeah, or even like a Jeffrey Toobin or—
Exactly, yeah. Jeffrey Toobin is another one. He's written entire books on the court. I mean, the CNN— he was the first person who was on CNN.
What's his name at NBC, who's very well respected?
Pete Williams. Pete Williams. Right?
These are people who have direct personal relationships, tons of sources within the courts.
Right.
Yeah, listen, this is all pure conjecture, but I would think that if it was actually one of the liberal justices, that it would have come to one of those.
I would think so too. Maybe they're trying to cover their tracks. Also, it's possible the justice had no idea. A member of the staff did it. Maybe they went to college with Alex or with Josh Gertz. You know, I mean, who knows? Like how these all things play out. Also, I did see some criticism of Politico for publishing this story.
Oh, come on.
And listen,
please.
If I had my hands on this, I hit publish the moment I know it's
silly.
real. No matter what you think.
I can't believe anyone's even arguing
Greatest story of all time.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of national impact, it's crazy.
And especially, I'm sure it probably came from the same people who would be outraged that, you know, Twitter censored the Hunter Biden story and things like that. It's like, all right, guys, we got to be consistent here. I do think that, you know, it was wrong to censor the Hunter Biden story. Obviously, if you're Politico or any news organization,
you run it.
Salt, you're going to run it.
There's no question.
I did think that, you know, there was a lot of conservative outrage about the fact of the leak itself. I just want to say, like, to me, the substance is way more important than the leak. I am not outraged about the leak. I view this listen, I have no respect for, like, the norms and guardrails of the Supreme Court. I think it's an undemocratic, unaccountable institution. I think it already kind of sucks. I think it's, you know, I think its norms suck too, by the way. Like, they have this instinct towards a total lack of transparency and also towards a total lack, which we covered on this show, of any sort of ethical guardrails for their own justices, unlike other places within the judiciary, within the federal judiciary. So, you know, and again, it's the same type of people who during the Trump era would have been like, the norms and guardrails, you guys stop with your pearl clutching, are now like, oh, how could you violate the sacred norms of the Supreme Court?
I get where they're coming from. I do think it's extreme. I think really whoever did this, you did us all a disservice because really, Krystal, and I agree with you, the substance is obviously the most important part. There's a reason we led the show with that. That's not going to be my first take. My real thing is, guys, as people we want to know the full picture. All we have is some draft opinion. We don't know the concurrence. We don't know what the law is. We don't know who voted against. We don't know what the full effect is. Okay, let's say that whoever leaked this is pro-choice. Well, listen, whoever you did this, you just put a lot of women in who are people. Maybe there's a lady who doesn't go get an abortion right now. I mean, listen, it's still the law. You can if you want to.
Or on the other hand, there could be someone who says, "I better get this shit done
right
now."
Right, exactly.
I mean,
listen, it's extraordinarily likely that that's going to happen, right?
Of course.
We could go. I'm sure there's going to be lines down the block on Planned Parenthood here in Washington or in many of the other liberal cities. So I just think that whoever did this really did us all a disservice.
I don't agree with that because I ultimately think the more information and the sooner the American people have that information, the better. I mean, we're also going to be talking about voting happening right now in critical political primary races that, you know, could very much be impacted by what looks extremely likely to occur in this case. So I totally disagree with that. I do actually think it was a service to have this information, to have the transparency around it, to have insight into their thinking. And, you know, I have no issue with whoever decided to leak this for whatever reason it was. And I think you're right to point out, like, there is sort of a working assumption that this was someone who was pro-choice, who was upset about the direction of the decision, who wanted to try to put pressure somehow and like a Hail Mary pass to get somebody to bend under public pressure and go a different direction. I don't think that there is any chance that strategy is ultimately going to work. So basically, I think this just gives us insight earlier to where the court has ultimately landed on, you know, one of the central fault lines in American politics of the last 50 years.
I would just like to say on this, which is that it will destroy trust on the Supreme Court, and it will change the way that this works for all time. Because, like I said, there is a pretty cordial relationship right now between, you know, like Justice Kagan is friends with, or Justice Ginsburg was really good friends with, like, Justice Scalia. And, you know, they go to conferences together, and Kagan is apparently close with Roberts, all this other stuff. Then that stuff is over in terms of sharing opinion. I know you don't care.
I don't really care about their decorum.
It could have a big impact, though, on all of us. I don't really know what that would look like.
I would personally be happy to see the trust and credibility of the Supreme Court go down.
Well, this is going to change. I mean, this is certainly going to polarize it. This is going to polarize it, no question, on the minds.
The other thing, I just wanted to point out some of the history here because you actually sent this morning, which is that there's no doubt that a premature leak of a decision is extraordinarily rare. but is not completely unprecedented. And actually, interestingly, when Roe was actually decided, there was a clerk for one of the justices who gave, I think it was Time Magazine, the jump on the story. And then, so the whole idea was, okay, I'm going to give you insight into what the decision is, but it's embargoed until the decision actually comes out. And because there was a delay in releasing the decision, Time actually, their magazine went to print and was on newsstands several hours before the decision actually came down, and really sort of like screwed over this clerk who tendered he was like, I'll resign if you want. And I mean, the reporter, you know, and Time Magazine really kind of screwed him over, because when you have an embargo, you have an embargo, and that's that. So that is an instance when it was leaked ahead of time and there was a jump on the story. Is obviously a little bit different than this situation where, you know, it's clearly an attempt by someone to inform the public early and potentially try to affect ultimately the outcome is whatever the outcome is here. Although, again, I think that is extremely, almost, you know, impossibly unlikely to happen. But it is very rare for this ultimately to happen, and does represent in its way also a sort of watershed breakdown in terms of, you know, how the court operates. Again, I have 100%. No problem with that, but that just is like the factual.
Hey, it's a factual matter. It's going to change course of business there on the court, and you know that is something which is going to be interesting. Also, let's go put this next one up there on the screen, just people who are asking about the authenticity. Here's what Politico said in response, and it should also be notable. It's kind of like the Hunter Biden story where, look, you think the Supreme Court's not aware that this is out there? If it was fake, they would tell us. They
would tell us. Yeah, they'd be like, they would have immediately shot it down.
They would have been like, this is a fake report. This is not. Actually, there's a good example of this. Recently, remember there was that story where people claimed that Sotomayor had to work from home because Justice Gorsuch wouldn't wear a mask.
That's right.
And they all put out statements being like, this is bullshit, that none of that happened. So we literally know that that happened. I think it happened like 3 or 4 months ago. So here's an example where been out there now. We're filming this. It's 8:47 a.m. here on the East Coast. Guarantee you all the justice has been up all night. If it was fake, they would have told us so. But in regards to that, the Politico says extensive review process. We're confident of the authenticity of the draft. And again, pretty much everybody who is familiar with the court says that this is absolutely an authentic draft. So look, take that for what you will.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.